All right, guys, it is here, the Redcat Machete. This is Redcat's new 1/6 scale monster truck, monster truggy, and this thing looks really awesome. In today's video, we're gonna take a close look at this thing, take a look at the differentials, get the weight, the dimensions, see what makes this thing tick, then we'll take it out for a quick blast. First of all, taking a look at this thing, this is a pretty big and pretty heavy truck. I'm actually surprised about how heavy it is. If you see here, this thing weighs almost 15 pounds. Dimension-wise, it's about 27 inches long, about 18 inches wide, which is a fair bit longer than something like an Arrma Outcast, but just about the same width. Now, taking a look at this body, we can see they've got these nice body clip retainers with body clip washers. These retainers are not the rubber I would expect them to be. They're a harder plastic, so it'll be really interesting to see how long these hold up. We've got nice roof skids, a nice front skid. Looking underneath, we can see the attachment points for those, and this body feels pretty good. It's not the thickest body in the world, but it does feel okay. I'm definitely gonna reinforce this before doing any serious bashing though. Now, this is where the real interesting stuff happens. This is under the hood of the Machete, and this is an all-new platform for Redcat, and this is the first new bashing platform that Redcat has come out with in a very long time. So if they get this right, this could really be a good thing for them. As we can see here, we've got a front-mounted motor and ESC. This is an 8BL150 direct from Hobbywing. The 4S version comes with a Max 10 ESC, which is actually a better ESC as far as features are concerned. I would have liked to have seen a Max 8 in here, but that's okay. We've got a heatsink and fan on the motor, and I bet we're gonna need that because the weight of this thing, matched with these 8-scale electronics, I think are gonna be a bit of a struggle, but we'll have to wait for the bashing to see how that goes. We've got XT90s, which you'll love to see. Don't have to immediately pull the connectors off and throw them away. This really nice full-length aluminum tower-to-tower brace. We've got aluminum drive shafts front and rear, and then these two battery trays here to run two 3S LiPos, but I'm sure you could just run one 6S LiPo as well. We've also got a little clip right here to hold on to the battery cable. That's kind of cool. Moving to the suspension, these arms are a lot beefier than I expected them to be. This aluminum is very thick. It's 14 millimeters in diameter, which is really nice to see. These shocks also look very beefy. They're all metal with just plastic caps top and bottom, but they look to be very good. These tie rods also look to be of good size. They're not captured on the top and bottom, which makes them a little bit weaker than a double shear design, but hopefully it's not gonna be too big of a deal. We've got sway bars. These CV drive shafts front and rear are gonna come in at 5 millimeters all the way around, which is pretty beefy and I think is appropriate for this kind of car. We've got a nice big bumper here, although this bumper doesn't seem to have a lot of give to it, so it'll be interesting to see how these hold up in crashes. Moving to the back, we've got this nice big wing, which feels pretty flexible. Some aluminum wing washers to reinforce the area where it mounts. Same shocks and arms and everything. This appears to be completely symmetrical front to rear. That's a good thing for parts, but it's a bad thing for strength in the rear because in the front, you've got these tie rods that hold the wheels in place, but when you get in a crash, that steering system can move and take some of that stress off that tie rod. You've got the same tie rods in the rear, but they are hard mounted. Sometimes that can be a problem. Again, we're just gonna have to wait and find out. Flipping this truck over, we can see I have the 6S version with the 7075 aluminum chassis. This chassis looks very nice and is 4 millimeters thick, which is nice and thick. Has these reinforcement ribs running down the middle of it. This appears to be a very well-made piece of aluminum, doesn't seem like a cheap stamping, so that really does inspire confidence. We've got these brand new arms front and rear for the lowers. On the back, we've got a wheelie bar. No bearings in this, but they roll pretty free. And again, this is all quite solid, so I'll be interesting to see how this holds up in crashes. Looking back at this power system, I have a couple of concerns here. This is a 1/8 scale power system, and this is not a 1/8 scale truck. I would love to put a bigger motor in here, but taking these wires off, you can see that this motor is butted right up against this steering arm, and you might be able to get something a couple millimeters longer in there, but I don't think you're going to be going much longer than that without doing some sort of revision to this. I'm not sure if we can flip this around and run the motor to the back. We're going to have to experiment with that in the future, which I'm going to be doing, so if you're interested in that, make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss it. Looking at this steering rack, it's neat to see they've got a little seal right here to stop debris from going in, and where the rack comes through, it's pretty small, so I don't expect debris to be too much of a problem for this steering rack. Now, what I want to see is how these differentials look. This doesn't look like it's going to be super easy to get into, so I'm going to go ahead and pull a differential and the center differential out, and let's take a look at those together, see what they're made of. Okay, so the center module with the motor and transmission is actually pretty easy to take out. All you have to do is remove this center brace, which is a solid aluminum rod, and then you just remove these two collars by undoing the grub screws that go through them. You're going to need a teeny tiny 50 thousandths hex bit in order to get those out, so if you don't have one of those, you might want to go ahead and buy one. Once you do that, it's 4 screws through the bottom, and then this whole thing comes out. Take a few screws off the front, and let's take a look inside here. Okay, so we've got some bearings here that these gears run on. These are full Mod 1 gears. They are sintered. This is the center differential. We've got an idler gear here. So we've got shielded bearings on the inside, but then sealed bearings where they need to be sealed on the outside. Taking a quick look at this center differential, this looks fairly stout. Nice big differential. Feels like the fluid is probably 1 million, I would say, which should be pretty good to start with. Taking a look at the elephant in the room, motor size. It does not appear that in its stock position you're going to get much bigger of a motor in here. However, this whole module is only on this chassis with 4 screws and 2 pegs. This is an aluminum chassis. Holes can be drilled in this very, very easily. What I'm picturing is take this battery tray out of here, move this module toward the back, reverse these 2 drive shafts, drill new holes, mount it up, and then you'd have plenty of room here in the front for whatever motor size you want. That's probably what I'm going to be doing on this truck because I'm definitely going to want more power. So if you're interested in seeing me do that, make sure you get subscribed. I'm going to get this put back together and then let's pull the front and rear differentials out. Okay, well that got pretty serious pretty quick. The rear end comes off as a module. There's a bunch of screws you have to take out to get that out. Unfortunately, you do have to take it completely out because there are 2 hidden screws in here that you can't get to with the module in. Once you do that, you take a couple more screws apart, and then we get the differential as its own little module here. Let's take a closer look at that. So once we have this module apart, we are left with a pretty darn beefy differential. These gears are very large. You can see here in comparison to an X-Max differential set of gears, it's not that much smaller in diameter. So I think that this thing, as long as these gears are made pretty well, should be able to hold up to some more power than the power systems they're putting in here by default. Not a lot of grease on these gears, but you don't need a lot of grease. Inside feels pretty good. Feels like it's probably got 20, maybe 50K in it. Overall, I think this is a pretty nice little setup. It's a bit of a mess to take apart, but with power tools, it really doesn't take that long. Okay, let me put all this back together. I'll see you outside. We'll take this for a quick blast. 2 things I wanted to talk about before we go out. First, these tires. Forgot to mention to you, these tires are gonna be almost 6.5 inches in diameter and about 3 inches wide, and they are held on with these really nice serrated nuts. Wheels look to be pretty good. There's a ton of meat around these hexes, so I think these will hold up pretty well. They feel well glued on, and they are vented from the factory, so that's really nice to see. Next, Redcat appears to have bought these screws directly from Arrma. If you're familiar with their 6S line, you're probably going to want to replace these motor mount screws. Finally, these little tiny grub screws that go into the center drive shafts don't have a stop as they go through, so you're definitely going to want to put some thread lock on these because they may very well back out if you don't. All right, get this tire on. I'll see you outside. Well, there you go, guys. That was not much of a crash, and we already broke one of these upper arms and bent the crap out of that drive shaft. So that's a little bit disappointing. It definitely seems to have a decent amount of power. It really wasn't getting terribly hot. I think that they have it geared pretty well for what it is, but That kind of breakage like that, that's just not acceptable for the kind of crash that I had. So I don't know, guys. We'll have to see where we go from here. I'll talk to Redcat, get some replacement parts. Maybe this was just a fluke. Hopefully it was, but knowing their track record with upper arms, I'm not going to be terribly surprised if this is something that people are going to be experiencing. So definitely something to keep in mind. And like I said, we also bent this drive shaft pretty badly when it happened. So I'm disappointed. I'll talk to Redcat. We'll get this thing running again, and hopefully we can try this again. With that, guys, I'm going to leave you with a successful bash. Go watch this one.